Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around. Turn me around, ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on talking, keep on fighting, marching up to freedom land. Everybody sings, keep on talking, keep on fighting, marching up to freedom land. Everybody stand, please.
Those are the dulcet tones of Jack Waddell. He's a Bloomington native whose career as an opera singer took him all over the globe. Waddell is one of many black musicians from Bloomington-Normal who went on to successful careers, but they encountered many obstacles along the way, and racism was one of the toughest. And they are sharing those stories as part of the Bloomington-Normal Black History Project. As part of Black History Month, the McLean County Museum of History hosted a recent panel discussion. It was meant to provide an historical account of African American musicians and safe spaces in Bloomington. You're going to hear portions of that discussion here in a special edition of Sound Ideas. You'll hear their tales of Jim Crow laws, the Underground Railroad, and gospel music in black churches. Joining Jack Waddell was Carolyn Ware, a pianist for Bloomington-Normal churches and a piano teacher for over 50 years, and James Gaston, owner of the downtown Bloomington music venue Jazz Up Front. Andrew Thomas, chair of the Bloomington-Normal Black History Project, moderated the panel. Waddell details how he not only faced racial barriers, he faced language barriers when he got his first opera gig in Germany. This was 5 years after he graduated from Illinois Wesleyan University.
Never let anyone define you. Never let anyone tell you what you cannot do. He said, you don't speak German. What are you going to do? You're going to possess, well, I'll learn how to speak German. I learned how to speak Italian, singing my first Italian opera here on West. And I did. Long story short, in 1968, I flew to Germany. I attended the Goethe Institute, which is equivalent to the Berlitz language school here in America, and studied in Berchtesgaden. At that time, it's the well-known Hitler's Eagle's Nest, where Hitler went to recoup from his losses during the Second World War. And I did an intensive case in studying German. Directly, 1968, I went to Munich from Berchtesgaden, and I made my debut. And my debut was a memorial concert to Dr. Martin Luther King, who had just been assassinated. And this launched my German and my European career. I did a memorial concert for Dr. Martin Luther King, all Negro spirituals. It took off. It was my big break. I went to Munich, to Frankfurt, to Berlin, to Holland, to Paris, and that was it. So that's how I began.
Wow, wonderful. Miss Carolyn Ware, I understand that your family has a huge legacy here in Bloomington-Normal, especially your dad, when it comes to the black church. Can you tell us the name of your father's name and his legacy here?
Yes, my father's name was Henry L. Brown, and he moved here from Memphis, Tennessee, and we first went to Union Baptist Church, and then we went to Mount Pisgah Baptist Church, where I'm still a member.
Can you tell us about how you started playing piano at Mount Pisgah?
Well, first I started playing piano at Union Baptist. After I had gotten baptized, I was about 12. And they're gonna find a job for you to do. You're not gonna come sit on the bench. So they started a children's choir, and I played for the children's choir at Union Baptist first. And then when we went to Mount Pisgah Baptist, I helped start the youth choir. And I played for all the choirs. Once upon a time, I played for the adult choir, the youth choir, the male chorus, and the children's choir. So I did full circle and ended up playing, my last choir to play for was the children's choir, which is the Sunbeam Choir at Mount Pisgah Baptist Church. So I played for over 50 years.
Now, from my understanding, you also taught piano.
I did. I taught piano, but my first pupil was my first cousin, Delmer Brown. And Delmer he didn't know his ABCs, and he couldn't even count. So, you know, first of all, Delmer was our very first cousin. We had other cousins, but we didn't know them because they didn't live in this area. And so Delmer was our very first cousin, so we spent a lot of time with Delmer. So I taught Delmer how to count, I taught him his ABCs, and then I started teaching him music. And I didn't realize he was gonna be such a famous musician when I started teaching him. Oh, I guess I might have been about 9 or 10 when I started teaching Delmer piano lessons. So I was one of his first pupils. He was my first pupil.
And for those who don't know, Delmer Brown, he was a huge star here in Bloomington-Normal. He went on to play piano for Sting. So yeah, he's a world-renowned musician. And we have here Mr. James Gaston. Like I said before, he's the proprietor of Jazz Up Front. But I understand that when we're talking about safe spaces, you know, the church, the institution of Black church is a safe space, but also a safe space could be a place where you get your hairdo done or get your hair cut, which obviously I don't need anymore, but we understand that your father was owner of a barbershop. Can you tell us about your dad, his name? And
my dad, everybody, most of these people in here know him, or a lot of them I can see knew him. Robert L. Gaston, and he was from Pearl, Mississippi. And my mother told me when she met my dad, he was playing blues on the corner. And they met and, of course, fell in love and went on to have 12 kids. And my dad was working, the story he told me, he was working at General Electric way back when, and he got tired of watching people get promotions past him, so he decided to pursue his own business, and he became a barber. First cutting, I can remember cutting hair in our house. People in the neighborhood would come over and get haircuts, and then next thing you know, he got his first barbershop. And thanks to a white gentleman, my dad told me that he had his eye on a building and they wouldn't rent the building to him because he was a black man. So a white friend of his said, "Bob, I'll take care of that." So he rented the building and sold the lease to my dad for $1. And he moved into his first barbershop, which was on Center Street, the corner of Center and Grove. And I don't remember the year, but I was a little kid then at that time. And the rest is history.
More from James Gaston of Jazz Up Front in a moment as we continue on WGLT's Sound Ideas. A historical account of African American musicians and safe spaces in Bloomington, presented by the Bloomington-Normal Black History Project. This is Sound Ideas on WGLT. I'm John Norton. We continue this panel discussion of safe spaces African American musicians sought during a time of racial discrimination. Andrew Thomas of the Bloomington-Normal Black History Project is moderating the discussion. The panelists include Carolyn Ware, entertainment venue owner James Gaston, and opera singer Jack Waddell, who explains how the Black church helped shape their careers as musicians.
I went to Germany to pursue an opera career. The first contract I signed was doing the musical Hair. Totally different. The first TV show I did was Name That Tune, the German version of Name That Tune, did that singing everything. And the surprise to me in Germany was they were thrilled with the fact I would be recording with the jazz band in Cologne in the studio doing 3 or 4 recordings, and they'd come and say, hey, well, when you finish here, would you go down and sing with the Philharmonic Orchestra, Porgy Bess, and sort of thing. The versatility that you have, you go where it leads you. In the musical Harris, where I met Donna Summer, where I was hired to train the Germans, because at that time, the Germans couldn't walk and chew gum at the same time. And to teach them vocals, teach them how to sing. They cannot, don't have rhythm, so that. So you don't know where it's going to go with the flow. Roberta Flack, ironically, we had the same voice teacher in Washington. She wanted to be an opera singer. Well, she turned out to be one of the best ballad singers ever, she and Nina Simone, and sort of thing. But you go where music leads you, and I think Karen and Jimmy both agree, it all begins in church.
Oh, yeah.
Roberta Flack, Donna Summer, they all started in the church singing gospel music, and that was their inspiration.
In the history, in the same vein, we're celebrating Black History here, I'm sorry. I remember during our conversation, you mentioned doing a play and a big production. Actually, I attended it over at Illinois State University, where you covered the history of a man named John Jones. Can you tell us about that production?
Yeah, I would love to. I did Mark Twain, the musical, for 10 years in upstate New York, in Elmira, New York. And it was quite a big success. And after one of the performances, 3 African-American high school girls came back to me and said, Mr. Waddell, we have been given a charge from our history teacher to write a term paper on someone other than Mark Twain in the area. And we heard, our family has always told a legend of a man named John Jones, who was a superintendent of the Underground Railroad. And he was the connection from Elmira to Canada, because as you know, historically, slaves were not freed until they got to Canada. Then they could not be retrieved. The 1850 Fugitive Slave Act that required all slaves to be returned to the plantation. You were not freed until you got to the plantation. And they said, we want to find out if this legend is true, if John Jones actually existed. And the municipal government of Elmira were poised to tear down the house where John Jones lived, where he hid as many as 30 slaves in his basement, so before he could put them on a train to Canada. Would you do a benefit for us to save John Jones' house? Fast forward, of course, I was delighted to do a benefit concert for them. And now I'm very proud to let you, it is one of the highest achievements. And with gratitude, John Jones, his house is a national monument. And it's on the registered list that they saved the house where John Jones lived. He was quite a character. When he passed away, the governor of New York State presented him with a solid gold walking stick. And he was quite the figure. I appreciate you asking for that, because John Jones is a very significant part of our culture.
This is a panel discussion on African American musicians in safe spaces in Bloomington-Normal. It's being broadcast on 89.1 WGLT and WGLT.org. Miss Carolyn Ware, you know, it's often thought about and discussed and analyzed that that there was Jim Crow going on in the United States, a time in the past where black people just were not allowed to go to certain restaurants and establishments. And most people think that that only occurred in the South. But we know, and I learned through these oral histories, that Jim Crow was right here in this town. There was certain places that just did not welcome black folk. So Ms. Carolyn Ware, when we was talking, you mentioned some places that black people were allowed and welcomed, and can you talk a little bit about that, about places that you feel that just wasn't welcoming for black folk?
Well, gosh, that's been so long ago. But there were some places that we weren't allowed to go, and some places we weren't. I think like Woolworths had a lunch counter, and I don't think we were allowed to go there to eat. And then there were some other cafes or restaurants we weren't allowed to really go into. But that's been so long ago. And as a young person back in the 50s, you wasn't aware of a lot of that going on. But we only heard about it because a lot of times we didn't go out to restaurants to eat anyway.
Mr. Jack Waddell.
I can relate to that. The first job I had after I graduated in 1963 was to tour with the Norman Luboff Choir. I was the only African American in the choir. I had never been south of the Mason-Dixon line. In fact, I remember one of the members stood up in the tour bus and announced on the microphone, "So, ladies and gentlemen, we have just crossed the Mason-Dixon line. Would everyone turn their clocks back 100 years?" But the story I would like to relate is pretty horrifying. Carolyn is absolutely right. To be able to attend and to sing on the Bob Jones University campus, I was the only African American in the choir. They had to get a written dispensation for me to appear on the campus. But the more horrifying story was on a free day. Everyone did the laundry, and I'm not thinking where I was. I thought, oh my God, yes, my laundry is overdue as well. I'll go with you. It was Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And I went with the rest of the choir and putting my stuff, in the washer and the dryer, not noticing that the laundromat was slowly emptying. All of a sudden, the door opens, and I swear it was the biggest, the tallest, the meanest looking state trooper I've ever seen in my life walked over to me with his service revolver drawn and put to the temple of my head. I need not tell you, it gives a new meaning to be frozen stiff, scared stiff. They literally had to carry me out of the laundromat. Leave your clothes here, we'll get everything we'll do. But that was my first experience in 1963. We were on tour when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. That was also another experience. But Jim Crow was alive and well, and Carolyn is absolutely right.
Mr. James Gadsden.
I can remember when I was a youngster, we used to go to the skating rink, which was on the Lafayette Club. Where the Lafayette Club is now, it was the skating place. Sunday night was black night. We could go on Sunday night. And we were out there having a great time one night, and then somebody stopped and screamed, and we all went over and looked out, and they were burning a cross right outside the skating place door or window. And we were all standing around, just, you could hear a pin drop, and everybody just was stopped and staring at this cross. We're in Bloomington, Illinois, you know, we're like,
Right.
we had never witnessed anything like that before, but that actually happened. And I'm sure Mike was there that night, probably. And then I just wanted to say, too, the place that Jazz Up Front is at now, it's called the Empire Lounge. When I was a youngster, we used to go to the Saratoga and stuff like that. And talking about places blacks weren't welcome, well, they weren't welcome in the Empire Lounge. And now I'm in there, I own the joints.
And Jazz Up Front hosted a jam session after the panel discussion. You heard from James Gaston, Jack Waddell, and Carolyn Ware. Andrew Thomas from the Bloomington-Normal Black History Project moderated the talk. You can read more about the event at wglt.org, and you can see video of the event on the McLean County Museum of History's YouTube channel.